I once thought I knew what loneliness was, until I fell in love with Aira. She was unlike anyone in Ebon Hollow, quiet, heartbreakingly beautiful, as if her entire being was woven from water and moonlight. Every time I saw her, I felt something stir within me, not desire, but a longing to understand, to hold on to her, even if just once. But Aira always vanished on the night of the full moon, without a trace, without a word. And then one night I followed her. I just wanted to know the truth. But what I saw under that moonlight shattered everything I had ever believed. I saw shimmering golden scales stretching across her back. I saw her disappear into the river as if it had swallowed the woman I loved. And from that night, I was no longer myself. Are you still here? Because if you leave, you'll miss a curse that spans centuries. At the southern edge of Mississippi, where willows cast their shadows over the river and the dark of night hums like the whispers of ancestors, there lies a small community called Ebon Hollow, a place where songs still echo from the days when people fled from chains. That land holds stories only the elders dare to tell, and they tell them in voices low enough for the wind to carry away, not for ordinary ears. There lived a young man named Malik, a woodcarver with calloused hands but a soul as soft as freshly peeled bark. He grew up with the smell of wood smoke and the jingle of Juneteenth celebrations. Malik's life wasn't full of turmoil, but since he was 10, he had dreamed the same recurring dreams, a girl standing in the river, moonlight reflecting off her skin like layers of falling gold dust. And then she appeared for real. Aira. Her name was like the gentle lapping of water against stone, soft, distant, a name no one dared to call familiarly. Aira never spoke much. She lived with a woman known as Mama Nima, a traditional healer. The villagers respected her, but they also whispered, because Aira only left the house on the nights of the full moon. Not just any full moon, but those nights when the moon reached its peak in the sky, so bright you could see the lines of your own palm. Whenever the moonlight drenched the river, people saw her sitting there on a slippery rock near the water's gate, her dark, tangled hair soaked, the moonlight seeming to melt in her eyes. Malik would pause his wood carving then, watching silently from afar, not out of easy love, but something deeper, as if his soul had known her somewhere far away before this human life began. He had never spoken to Aira, never dared to approach her, but that night, the night of the highest moon of the year, something in Malik compelled him to follow. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was loneliness, or maybe it was a wordless call from within his heart, like the drum his great-grandfather once used to signal approaching danger. He crept after Aira, through the reed fields, past the riverbank. No one dared to tread after sunset. The wind seemed to stop blowing, and time collapsed into a single, long breath. Then he saw her. Aira stood at the edge of the rock, her bare feet touching the water's surface. Her hands reached up, touching a strand of moonlight that fell like loose silk. And right before Malik's eyes, her skin began to glow, not an ordinary light, but a shimmering golden radiance, like fish scales glinting under midday Sunday. Her back emitted soft beams of light, like mist, and then a tail appeared. Malik froze. There was no scream, no one to prove he wasn't dreaming. Aira turned her head, her eyes glistening like water about to break. Then, in a single fluid and decisive motion, she dove into the river as if returning to herself. A column of water burst upward, sparkling with gold, then everything sank into silence. Malik stood there, his hands trembling, his heart beating unevenly, not out of fear, but because in that moment, he knew one thing for certain. The girl he loved from afar was not just human. And perhaps, He wasn't the only one with a past yet to be told. Under the moonlight that night, the Mississippi River seemed to smile an old, sad, and deeply true smile. Do you believe a person can carry within them the curse of the water? Malik was no longer himself after that moonlit night. Every time he closed his eyes, the image of shimmering golden scales reappeared, as if etched into his retinas, and his heart, since the moment Aira vanished beneath the water, no longer beat to its old rhythm. It became chaotic, like festival drums struck out of sync in a crowd. He quietly avoided the gazes of everyone in the village, not because he feared being found out for following a girl at night, but because he dreaded that if he spoke, they would think he had lost his mind. After all, who would believe a story about someone turning into a fish? Who would believe that scales could grow from human skin? That moonlight could summon a soul from the river's depths? But Malik had no other choice. He had to find out. He had to know what she was and why he couldn't forget her. On a stifling afternoon, when the midday cicadas droned steadily over the wooden rooftops, Malik went to the house of old man Kudjo, the oldest living person in the village. His eyes were clouded, but his memory was as sharp as a cane-cutting knife. People called him the breathing archive of Ebon Hollow, for he remembered every story, every name, every strange breeze that had ever passed through the village. Malik didn't say much. He only asked, "Have you ever heard a story about someone with golden scales?" Kudjo didn't answer right away. He pulled a small, black, glossy stone, worn smooth by time, from a bamboo basket. Placing it in Malik's hand, he sighed. Some things shouldn't stay buried, and some things, when they rise from the water's depths, will never let us sleep soundly again. He spoke, in a voice as low as ancient wind, about a legend called the Golden One, a sea spirit carrying the light of an entire forgotten world who once guided their ancestors across rivers in the night as they fled from plantations. She led the way with her glowing scales, her song, her tireless heart, but then she was betrayed by the one she trusted most. When the slavers caught her, they locked her in a heavy iron cage and sank it into the middle of the Mississippi. They thought her light would go out. But before she melted into the riverbed, she cursed the land. "The last of my children will bring the light back. And when she stands in the river, if no one chooses her, you will all pay the price." That story, according to Kudjo, was never written down, but he remembered his grandmother saying, "When the golden scales return to the water's surface, the old blood will rise." Malik left Kudjo's house with a chest heavy as stone. He didn't dare believe, but couldn't deny that the pieces were starting to fit. Aira only appeared during the full moon. She lived with a woman who wasn't her birth mother. She didn't eat fish. She didn't drink salt water. And that light didn't belong to humankind. That evening, Malik returned to his wooden house, and for the first time, opened the old chest under his bed, the one his grandmother had forbidden him to touch. Dust covered it thickly, like long buried memories. Inside were a few old items, a shawl embroidered with the name Amani, and a tattered notebook, torn apart by time. In the last legible page, written in slanted brown ink, were the words, "The girl with golden scales, skin that smells of salt, born from the tears of a man who couldn't save her mother." Malik's breath caught. Those words, that final sentence, seemed to speak of him. No, not the him of today, but a part of his blood, a branch of a past he was never taught. He closed his eyes, still clutching the torn paper, and for the first time since his father's death, Malik heard singing in his mind, not the voice of a human, but the sound of waves, a lullaby soothing a soul struggling to reclaim its memories. Aira was not just the girl with golden scales. She was living proof, a breathing curse. and perhaps the last chance for Malik to redeem something his ancestors had lost. All right, my dear audience. Today's story is about a girl with shimmering golden scales, a centuries-old curse, and a love that transcends the boundaries between human and sea spirit. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment to let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I'm always excited to welcome you from all corners of the world. The moonlight hadn't changed its hue since that night. Malik realized this as he looked up at the sky once more, where the moon hung silently, shining brilliantly as if no sorrow had ever touched the earth below. But within him, everything had shifted. Since opening the chest, reading the slanted words in the diary, hearing Cudjoe speak of the Golden One and the forgotten story, a deep part of him seemed to have awakened. It was no longer just a desire to understand Aira, but a strange compulsion, a call from beyond his blood, beyond time. He returned to the riverbank, the very place where Aira had vanished into the shimmering water that night. The night breeze cut through his skin, rustling through the willow branches like a hand gently pulling memories back. Under the moonlight, the river was like a breathing mirror, reflecting the loneliness of two souls who had never truly belonged anywhere. Aira was standing there, as if she had been waiting. No call, no surprise, just a presence like fate itself. She didn't look at Malik, her gaze fixed on the middle of the river, where the water was deepest and where no one who slipped would ever return. Malik didn't speak, not out of fear, but because he knew some stories needed no introduction. And then, in a silence that seeped into every breath, Aira began to unveil the truth piece by piece, layer by layer, like a mourning veil being lifted from the face of memory. She was not human in the fullest sense. In her veins, alongside blood, flowed the breath of the sea, the soul of a nameless woman once spoken of in sighs and averted glances. Her ancestor was a mermaid, not the mythical kind adorned with shells and crowns, but a being born of sorrow and a yearning for freedom. In the dark days of history, when enslaved people used the cover of night to find a path to life, she had risen from the river, her skin aglow and her song guiding the way. Each person who crossed was a quiet victory, a survival story that official history would never record. But then, like all beautiful legends, she was betrayed. A man, fearing recapture, revealed her hiding place to the plantation owners. They captured her, bound her with silver chains, the only thing that could draw blood from sea-born spirits, and cast her into the river like they were casting away the last shred of hope. She didn't die, not in the usual sense. Her soul dispersed into the water, the stones, into every fragment of light when the moon shone on the river's surface. And before she faded, she cursed. Every 33 lunar cycles, her descendant would rise with golden scales to finish what had begun with a choice. Either return to the water and let the curse sleep on, or let the land where she was betrayed drown in the river's wrath. Aira was the last child of that bloodline. Born on a stormy night, found by Mama Nima among the roots of a great tree by the river, wrapped in seaweed, like a creature washed ashore. She had never cried, never called anyone mother. And throughout her life, she had only known how to hide from people, from their gazes, from the destiny drawing near. Now, the 33rd moon was approaching, and Aira, she wasn't sure she would return to the river again, not because she was afraid, but because she was tired. Tired of bearing a curse she didn't create. Tired of carrying a soul that wasn't given a choice. Tired because every time she looked into the water, she saw it all. Her betrayed ancestor, the cries of children in the night of escape, and her own eyes, unsure if she was still human. Malik didn't ask questions. He didn't need more details. In that moment, he understood. And perhaps for the first time in her life, Aira was seen with eyes that didn't judge. The moonlight illuminated her face, and Malik noticed the golden scales beginning to appear beneath her neck, like living strokes of ink. She was about to return, but this time, it might be the last. That night, the sky was empty, like a chest that had lost its final breath. No scattered stars, no humming insects. Only the moon stood alone, hanging, suspended like the gaze of something waiting. Malik sat with his back against a willow tree, where the breeze gently tugged at his sweat-dampened curls, as if caressing, as if awakening something long dormant in his blood. The exhaustion didn't come as usual. It didn't close his eyes, but pulled him deep down, not into a dream, but into a thick, black void, where there was no sound, no breath. Only memories no one had told him, yet so familiar, as if he had lived them before. He stood in a flooded forest, where tree roots crawled like ancient ribs, and mist drifted across his face like lingering souls. Before him was a man, tall, sturdy, with tightly coiled hair tied back, his eyes both gentle and piercing. That face, though marked by a different era and a scar beneath the left eye, was eerily similar to Malik's, not just in appearance, but in something deeper, something called inherited guilt. The man knelt, embracing a trembling figure under the moonlight. A girl with golden scales on her shoulders, her hair soaked with river mud, her eyes wide open, not from fear, but from disappointment. He bowed his head, whispering something, like a promise. But as his gaze lifted, before the promised words could finish, his hands fastened a silver chain around her. Malik saw it all, unable to intervene. A silent betrayal, quiet but excruciating. The girl was pushed into the water. No scream, only the light on her back slowly sank away. Malik woke, his heart pounding like funeral drums in his chest, not because he had dreamed of death, but because he had seen the truth. Not about Aira, but about himself, about his bloodline, about the roots that had long burrowed within him but were never named. He was the descendant of the one who betrayed the mermaid, the one who swore to protect and then destroyed the most sacred thing. The Mississippi River before him was no longer still. It rippled as if breathing, as if alive. And from the mist, a figure emerged, faint at first, then clear, as if she had always been there, waiting for him to muster the courage to look directly. She was tall, her skin dark as a dawnless night, her hair reaching the water like a current stretching across generations. She didn't speak, but Malik knew. Mama Naya, the spirit of the river, of the curse, of words never forgiven. There was no blame, no angry glance, only a heavy silence that made Malik feel every action of his ancestors pressing on his shoulders like boulders. Mama Naya didn't speak, but Malik heard her words echo in his mind clear, each syllable striking straight into his blood. The curse doesn't linger because of those who bear scales. It endures because no one has borne its consequences. She raised her hand, and the water before her parted not into waves, but into light, like a tear in reality, revealing a path only one who takes responsibility could walk. A choice was laid before Malik, not forced, but unavoidable. Sacrifice his soul, become the keeper of the vow his ancestor broke, to set Aira free, or step back, withdraw from fate, and let the river take her forever. There was no reward for the brave, no comfort for the one who sacrifices, only the truth and its consequences. Malik looked into the water. He didn't see his own face, but Aira's eyes from that night both resolute and desperate, as if she was ready to vanish if it could free everyone else. But she didn't deserve to bear it alone. No one deserved to carry the curse of history by themselves. He stepped toward the light. No trembling, no tears. Because this time, he knew it wasn't about saving Aira, but about repairing himself. His hand touched the light, and the river began to sing, "Which soul will be kept, and which will be set free?" When the light from Malik's hand touched the water, the entire Mississippi seemed to pause. Every movement of time, of air, even of the memories in the mud beneath his feet, suddenly held its breath. The cold didn't come from the night breeze, but from within, from Malik's own body, gradually merging with the pulse of the river's heart. And in that moment, the water's surface opened, not loudly, not hurriedly, only deeply and invitingly. Ira appeared beside him, no longer with golden scales, no longer with light, just a girl with eyes carrying a quiet pain. But Malik knew she was returning to the place that had once called her. Not to surrender, but to end it. Together they stepped down. The water enveloped their ankles, then their chests, then over their heads. Not a cry, not a gust of wind. Only the low hum of the earth opening up. Beneath the river's surface was another world. Not an ocean, not the muddy bottom people imagined, but a labyrinth of water, pitch black, where light could not survive and silence was the only thing audible. Yet their feet didn't touch the bottom. They floated like souls yet to be chosen, drifting through layers of water thick as velvet embroidered with history. And then they reached the blood coral gate. It wasn't a gate in the usual sense. It was an arch woven from branches of deep red coral, like torn arteries, with jagged fragments jutting out like the claws of unappeased ancestors. From the gate, hundreds of eyes opened, eyes without pupils, only clouded like tarnished mirrors. These were the eyes of the betrayed, the father who couldn't save his child, the mother torn from her embrace, the sister who never reached the shore. Each gaze was a wordless question. Are you worthy to pass? Aida touched a piece of coral, and the gate opened. Beyond it was the river's temple, stone walls covered in moss, threads of water curling around like breathing silk. At the center stood a throne of bone, upon which presided a being that made the entire space halt. Zebetha. She didn't step out of the darkness. She was the darkness. The form of a towering black woman, her hair not hair but snakes not writhing like Medusas, but standing still like soldiers awaiting orders. Her eyes burned like flames kindled by resentment. Her voice resounded not through her mouth but through the flow of water deep and full of reproach. Zebetha didn't need to ask why they had come. She knew, for every step into the river had to pass through her wrath. She was the embodiment of the betrayed souls never named. She was the witness to every vow made and then forgotten. She demanded a price. Not a promise, not tears, but a sacrifice. Malik? He, the descendant of the one who broke the covenant between man and river, his blood still carrying the scent of betrayal. Ira stepped forward, her shoulders trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from knowing the price wouldn't end with Malik if she let it be. She knelt, not begging, only offering her heart, ready to trade herself. Zebetha was silent. The water vapor around the temple rose, swirling into spirals as if her anger awaited release. But at that moment, Malik stepped forward. He didn't look at Ira. He didn't look at Zebetha. He looked into his own heart. From within his chest, not with a knife, not with blood, Malik drew out a small stone black as night, but glinting blue whenever water touched it. Not a gem, but an ancestral stone. Something no one had ever spoken of, yet always present in those who dared face their own memories. It wasn't formed from strength, but from a chain of atonement spanning generations each time someone in Malik's lineage returned to apologize, to help others live, to refuse repeating old wounds. That stone held memories, blood, and the desire for forgiveness. Malik offered the stone with both hands. Zebetha looked at the small object, and in her fiery eyes, something softened, a wet glimmer, like dissipating smoke. not because Malik was worthy, but because at last, someone had taken responsibility without needing forgiveness. Someone dared to step into the storm, not to be saved, but to return what was never received. Can you guess what happens next? Take a moment to relax. Comment with the number 1 or "I'm still here" to keep listening. The entire temple sank into silence after the ancestral stone touched Sabetha's hand. No more seething vapor, no more fiery swirls in her eyes. Only a silence so deep it seemed to swallow all breaths, all memories. In that moment, the river seemed to stop flowing. A moment without time, without gravity, as if all of history was waiting to see what would be kept and what would vanish forever. Zabetha lifted the stone with 2 fingers, turning it gently as if feeling the layers of crystallized memories within. The light from the stone reflected on her face, no longer the red of anger, but shifting to a soft indigo, like the glow of a world forgiven. She said nothing, only placed the stone on Malik's forehead. Light spread from that point, flowing down his body like reborn water, then flooding the entire temple. Immediately, the moss-covered stones began to tremble lightly. The walls seemed to pulse with life, murmuring like wind through a reed forest. The blood coral gate, once sealed by the bound souls of ancestors, slowly opened, and from within, delicate threads of light escaped, like wisps of smoke, rising through the dark water. These were not mere beams of light, but the souls once held captive. They didn't wail or curse, only drifted upward quietly, as if being carried to where they had long deserved to go. Aira looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, but not from fear. She reached out to where the golden scales had once clung along her arms, a reminder of a fate not of this world. Now, those shining scales peeled away gently, without pain, without struggle, like petals falling from a branch in the right season. They dissolved into the water, then followed the streams of souls upward, becoming shattered moonlight in the darkness. Aira let out a long breath, as if living for the first time without the weight of another's soul. She no longer glowed, no longer bore scales, no longer carried the shadow of legend. She was human, whole, and free. But Malik was different. As the stone dissolved in Zabetha's hand, his body collapsed. No blood, no cry, only a disintegration, like sand swept from the shore. Aira knelt beside him, her hands searching for a pulse that had stopped. But before tears could fall, she felt something. Not a tremor, but a rhythm deep, ancient, not from a human heart, but from the river's core. The light from Malik didn't fade entirely. It transformed, no longer the golden light of sacrifice, but a deep green, like a forest after rain. His body melted into the water, yet didn't vanish. It swirled into a new form, not distinctly human, but with eyes and a gentle glow. Malik didn't die. He was kept, but no longer mortal. He had become the new keeper of the water. A soul no longer bearing guilt, but responsibility. An entity standing between 2 shores, human and river, earth and myth. No longer the descendant of a betrayer, but the new root of healing. Zabetha retreated into the water's shadow, her anger gone. Her gaze lingered on Aira one last time, like a silent blessing. The temple opened, no longer shrouded in darkness, but bathed in light. The souls had risen, the river breathed again. Aira floated slowly toward the surface. She didn't rush. She knew for the first time she could rise without anything holding her below. When she reached the surface, her skin was no longer cold and damp, but met the night breeze like true human flesh. The moonlight embraced her, no longer a shackle, but a thin blanket draped over a girl reborn. Below, where no one could see, Malik remained. Every drop of the river now carried his breath. Each time the water overflowed its banks or the wind stirred through the reeds, the people of Eben Hollow would know a soul was watching over them, not to quell anger, but to remind them that redemption is never too late when chosen with the heart. But was Malik truly set free, or has he now become the start of a new cycle? That morning, the Mississippi stirred as if an old soul had awakened from a long dream. The water no longer churned with waves, yet it wasn't as still as before. It carried a strange golden hue, not blinding, but soft, like dawn light, reflected through an aged oil painting, the kind of light that made people pause for a moment, then fall silent. No one in Ebon Hollow could say exactly what had happened, but from that morning, they began to look at the river with different eyes. Ira returned in the form of an ordinary person. No more golden scales, no more mythical bearing, no more hesitant steps under the moon. She lived again among people, among children with ringing laughter, among mothers with brightly colored headscarves, and among the dark-skinned men who quietly fished by the water's edge. No one asked who she had been, for in her eyes they saw only one thing: someone who had walked through the depths and returned without carrying darkness. Aira opened a small swimming class by the riverbank, right where old man Kudjo's wooden boat used to rest. No blackboard, no books, only her storytelling voice and the gentle lapping of water. The children loved her not because she was once a legend, but because she listened and because every story she told felt wrapped in water and dreams. She spoke of spirits in the water, not to frighten, but to remind. Some things cannot be seen with the naked eye, but can be felt if the heart remains true. Gradually, the villagers began to call the river by different names. No longer the place that sank boats or the mouth that swallows men. They called it kinder names: the Life Vein, the Oath Keeper, or simply Malik. No one knew exactly what Malik had become, but everyone felt he was still there. Whenever the breeze blew from the water, it carried the scent of white tea blossoms and dry wood. Whenever a child fell into the river and surfaced unharmed, the old women would nod. He still remembers the little ones. And every year, on the night of the highest moon, when the village gathered under silver light, the Mississippi would suddenly turn a faint gold, not too bright, just enough to make people hold their breath. That night, everyone sat in a circle around a fire. No festival, no horns or drums, only Aira telling stories. The tale was no longer about the mermaid, the curse, or the gate beneath the river. It was the story of a young man who loved so deeply he dared to trade, his soul so loved wouldn't die in silence. Each time she reached the end, Aira didn't cry. But her eyes always shimmered with a light, not tears, but living memory. The children of the village began to believe in a new legend. That if you had something left unsaid, an apology unoffered, or someone unforgiven, write it on a small piece of paper, fold it, and release it into the river on the night of the highest moon. And if you saw a golden light reflected, it meant Malik was listening. That legend wasn't in any book. It didn't need to be proven or carved into stone, but somehow it lived on in every meal, every laugh, every breath of Eben Hollow. It made people live kinder, listen more, and know that even things beyond saving could still be forgiven. Aira grew old with the years, but never frail. Each wrinkle was a story she retold, each silver hair a soul she had helped cross the water. She didn't seek to be written into history. She only wanted to swim among the laughter and keep that legend alive through new generations, children who never knew of the curse, but carried the belief that love, if deep and true enough, could tear through fate itself. People often think stories end when the curse is broken, when light returns, when the hero finds rest in the embrace of the community. But in Eben Hollow, an ending was never a stopping point. It was merely where the river turned a new course, carrying silent seeds to fields yet to be sown. And from that place, a new legacy began quietly, steadfastly, like water seeping deep into the earth, unassuming but undeniable. The children who grew up around Aira's riverside class carried no memories of golden scales or cursed moonlit nights. But they carried something else, a quiet reverence when passing the water's edge, an instinctive bow as the sun set, or sometimes a whispered word, barely audible, when gazing at the light reflecting on the river's surface. Some children were more sensitive than others. Some sat for hours by the bank, hands never touching the water, yet their lips moved as if speaking to someone deep below. Some wept without reason at the sound of the water's lapping. Some, touching the cold river, suddenly smiled as if receiving comfort invisible to adults. Aira didn't explain. She only placed a hand on each child's head, gentle as one soothing a dream to rest. She understood these were the children who carried the river in their hearts, descendants not of blood, but of soul. One year, on the night of the highest moon, when the village gathered by the river to release their wishes into the water, a boy named Zion, just turned 9, let a blank piece of paper float away. When Aira asked why, he only said, "I don't need a wish. I'm just saying thank you." That answer, short and quiet, tightened Aira's chest. For Malik years ago, when he was still alive, had said something similar to her. When people stop wishing and start being grateful, that's when love no longer needs conditions. And as if arranged by the spirits, that night the golden light didn't just reflect on the water, but shone on each child's face, as if the river was memorizing every name. The adults in the village, though none had directly witnessed Malik's journey, began to change. They started telling their children stories once hidden, about the grandfather who was cowardly, the grandmother who betrayed, the cracks in the family tree no one dared name. No one shied away from their ancestors' flaws anymore. They claimed them, not to cast blame, but to understand that everyone today has the power to mend, even when the past is sealed. And when those stories were told amid laughter, embraces, and empathetic glances, what was once a burden became a door to connection across generations. The Mississippi was no longer just a river. It was memory, witness, lifeblood. Every year, on the moonlit night, it changed color, but no longer as a sign of a curse, but as a revelation of gratitude. Those who had lived through war, through racism, through poverty and ruin, sat together as if they were different patches of earth, watered by the same stream. They understood that forgiveness wasn't just for others, but for themselves to walk forward more lightly. Aira, her hair now silvered, often sat on the porch, watching the children run by with mud-caked feet, hands clutching baskets of wildflowers, her heart full of peace. No one called her a mermaid anymore. No one spoke of what was lost. They only knew her as the keeper of the flame, the storyteller, the one who reminded. And sometimes, when night fell, if you listened closely, you might hear the water giggling like a child. That was Malik whispering to the new generation, not in words, but in the rhythm of water lapping the shore, like the steady beat of a love that never left. Aira is now only a memory within the heart of the water, but some say that at the river's bottom, Malik's soul still listens not to judge, but to embrace the words left unspoken. And some swear they've seen a faint, golden light beneath the old Naya Bridge, not just once, but for 3 nights in a row. Perhaps a new cycle is beginning. Perhaps the legend hasn't ended. And what about you? Is there something you've inherited that you've never dared to face? Is there someone you want to forgive, even if only in your heart? Share your story in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share if you feel your heart has just been gently touched. If you want me to continue telling part 2, leave a message. Because the water never stops whispering.